Thank you, everyone, and thank you for attending, both in person and to our live audience. But before you hear from David and Richard, we would like to play a video clip of Fellowship Farm.
For 75 years, Fellowship Farm has been an educational leader in the field of human relations, becoming one of the nation's premier education and retreat centers dedicated to leadership development and social change. Throughout its rich history, Fellowship Farm has hosted many influential individuals and groups. Martin Luther King Jr. first learned about Gandhi's theory and practice of nonviolence there.
It was not so much connecting with Martin Luther King as connecting with his ideas, having some sort of a feel about him as a person just by being in his presence.
The farm collaborated with Native Americans, educated people about Africa, the Bright Continent, received Central American refugees, and was the first sister agency for Nev Shalom, an Arab-Jewish cooperative settlement in Israel. Youth growth has been their focus in areas of leadership development and helping community activists learn team building. Fellowship Farm is an advocacy organization that develops programs to serve the community, designed to strengthen families and help build leadership skills for youth.
It's youth, and it's also families, and it's also adults.
I learned how to be more self-expressive at Fellowship Farm. I learned how to make friends and keep friends. Fellowship Farm also had such a big impact on my life that 17 years later, I remember just like it was yesterday. I remember the activities, I remember the people that were there, I remember the breakfast. I remember that warm oatmeal, and it wasn't any different from any other oatmeal, but it was that warm, soothing feeling that it gave me because of the atmosphere I was in. It was just a warm place to be. So I love Fellowship Farm.
That's what's been happening at Fellowship Farm over and over again for 75 years. And we want to make sure that that continues to happen, that we inspire people for the next 75 years to live a life of fellowship. We need that now more than ever.
There are a few activities that they can demonstrate, and we're going to ask for audience participation.
We're simulating a couple of activities out of the 15 to 20 that we might do in a program.
Okay.
And this is called Not or Not Not.
All right. Now, let's see here. Our wonderful volunteers, all right? If I could have our volunteers join me, and you can face each other. So if you were to take a look at this, as well as Andre and David behind me, right now it just looks like a rope. But if you notice, I have an end here, okay? And I also have an end over there.
Do we have to do anything?
And just very quickly, I'm going to need 2 volunteers just to share with me your name. What's your name? Natalie. Natalie, and I'm going to grab one on this side. Pamela. Natalie and Pamela. Suppose I had Natalie come over here, and you're not going to do that yet, but Natalie would pick up this end of the rope. And Pamela picked up the other end of the rope. And Pamela were to take the end of the rope and walk through that door, and Natalie likewise this way. If you guys were to pull the rope vertically, would this end up in a knot or not? If we were to pull this rope, if Natalie pulled this in and Pamela pulled that in, would it end up in a knot or not? If you think it is a knot, I need you to stand on this side. If you think it is not a knot, I need you to stand on this side. You may move. It is a knot. It is not a knot. All right. Okay. Awesome. Now, one more challenge for you. Okay. I need one representative to tell me why you're standing on that side. What is it that you see? Why do you think you're standing on the side where it is a knot? Yes.
It looks like it's all intertwined together, so I say when you start to pull at both ends, it's going to wind up a knot.
Okay. And I need one volunteer on this side to share with me why it is not a knot. By show of hands, how many people from where you're sitting think it is a knot? Raise your hand. Okay. How many think it's not a knot? Raise your hand. Well, let's see how well they did with their convincing. Well, here's the thing. We're not going to pull the rope as of yet.
Yeah. Right.
What I need to happen, because right now we're talking about what we think and what we see and how we get others to think like we think, how we get others to believe what we believe. I'm going to actually ask David if he can come forward and do something else with you, with the whole audience, before we go to the next level of is it a knot or not. All right, David.
Hey, you can sit down.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Please stand. And now, this is going to last 60 to 90 seconds, so don't get too concerned. I'm going to ask you to please take this finger, pointing finger, and stretch it out to the ceiling so your elbow's locked and straight vertically, all those except for those shoulder tears. Now I want you to imagine a clock in the ceiling that goes clockwise, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, an analog clock. Now what I want you to do, and follow me for 60 seconds, I want you to go clockwise and circle with your whole shoulder, big wide circle clockwise. Then gradually bend your elbow so your finger is still pointing to the ceiling, and gradually circle your finger clockwise, but lower your finger so that it's circling clockwise until it's just below your eye or nose. Now look down at your circling finger and tell me what direction your finger is now circling.
Counterclockwise.
You may sit down. For those who didn't hear, they screamed what?
Counterclockwise.
So, most of you said, I started clockwise, and then I looked down, and it was going counterclockwise. What word, phrase, might you say describes why that phenomena happened?
Perception.
Perception, another word or phrase.
Perspective.
Perspective, perception, perspective, another word or phrase.
Point of view.
Point of view. So let's take this. Perception, perspective, or point of view. There could be somebody else who says, you tricked us. But we're not going to take those responses, okay? So now, just think about this. From my perspective or point of view, I'm going clockwise, right? You were going clockwise. And then from my perspective or point of view, based on my perception, it is now going counterclockwise. So, what does this have to do with diversity and inclusion as a teacher? You talked about differences and stigmas in education. As a teacher, I got this amazing lesson plan, and I know how my students will respond to this. And I'm doing this, and it doesn't have to be a developmental challenge, although it could be. It could be a social style difference. It could be rural to urban. It could be something. What's the great story from the Peace Corps? You go to the Peace Corps in Africa, the great story where they're teaching math to the village young people. And it says, you have a gun, and there are 10 birds on the wire, and you shoot the gun, and you hit one bird. How many birds are left on the wire? And what is the answer? Let me hear. What is the answer? Don't be afraid of being wrong. 0. What's another answer? 9. Because in one culture, what we're saying is linearly, when I say I have 10 and then I shoot 1, there's 9. That's the right answer. And in that culture, when you shoot 1, the noise will scare off all the birds and there'll be none. And so from my perspective, the teacher says, wait a minute, from Dayton, Ohio, those kids don't get the math. And from the kids, they say, this teacher doesn't get the reality of our village. And both need to know the other person's perspective. Or at Comcast, we were just talking about national sales or customer service. So I'm sitting here, and I'm in New Jersey, in an urban area in New Jersey, and I'm on the phone with a customer who is from a rural area in Alabama. There is a way in regard to pace, style, accent, that when I speak to the person as though they are like me, like I am, I run the risk of missing how they perceive of my pace as not trying to be clear and direct, but by being rude and not listening, but rather telling. So in business, whether it's in education or whether it's in national security, what we're looking at is, I see it from this way, but before I go ahead and implement it, let me listen and understand where others see it. First, seek to understand, and then only seek to be understood. You know the concept of devil's advocate? Where you say, in a team meeting, let me be a devil's advocate. It's almost like the senator saying, with all due respect. There was a leader who instituted in her team this ritual, which is once we have a conflict, an innovative idea to solve a problem or to create a system or a product, when somebody presents or speaks, everybody is obligated as the ticket of their ability to speak next to be an angel's advocate. Because everybody, for good or not so good reasons, knows how to be a devil's advocate, particularly if they want to. You ever see somebody at a meeting and they're like, their knees going, they're pretending, oh yeah, I'm really interested in you, but you know as soon as you shut up, they're going to go in and say, yes, but, rather than yes, and. So an angel's advocate is, this leader instituted, she said, before anybody speaks at this team meeting, after somebody else speaks, you are obligated to first be an angel's advocate. Angel's advocate means that you have to first listen and then start off by saying, what's your first name? Jay. You know, now I may think, oh, that's ridiculous. I'm going to really get over on you with a leader. I have to listen and then say, you know, here are, you mentioned 8 points. Here are 3 key things that I think are valuable about what Jay said. And also, I'd like us to consider the following. And I present 3 or 4 more. So what that does is that ritual forces me, as I'm waiting for you to take a sigh so I can jump in, forces me to actually listen, because my permission is going to be dependent upon me actually remembering what you said and identifying 3 key items, strong items that I thought were valuable to our solution or to our idea. And only then am I able to say not but, yes, but this is 100%, but and. And part of what we're talking about when we're talking about diversity and inclusion is talking about the yes and, not the yes but. This is the only way to do it.
Thank you. Okay. Brittany?
We have some questions from the virtual audience. One being, they want to know if Fellowship Farm has any intention to move across the country to have more locations.
We work with a lot of other organizations like the school districts we talked about, like the Coalition for Essential Schools, like the Child Guidance Resource Centers, and other organizations, and we love to co-work with and design programs for adults, organizations, or young people.
I have one more question.
Okay.
Someone asked if, this is a hypothetical, if Martin Luther King were still alive today, what class or what theme do you think he would teach today at Fellowship?
It's kind of bringing it together, because we said a little bit at the beginning. But I, thank God, I was involved in civil rights movement and jail, and Richard was involved in different ways when Dr. King was alive and leading programs. And when those dogs attacking his kids and fire hoses and machine guns, I mean, all that was arrayed against him, and beatings, he would go right up to the person spitting at him and yelling curses and epithets at him. And he would beam love. And he would beam an energy that he believed could change and indeed transform the adversary, because what happened is they were the ones with the shackles that were acting out things they didn't realize about their acculturation. And he trusted and believed that that spirit could transform. Let's say I was working with a police force in this major city years ago, and I would just be exhausted over every session as a facilitator. And I would say to myself, this is just tearing me apart, because all the pictures on the wall were all white Anglo men until just 2 years ago, and they're coming because they're fourth. And all of a sudden I realized part of it was me. I needed to treat these people, not that I need to change them.
Right.
I needed to treat them as they're good people, and that they had the resources and the will to unshackle themselves, and they didn't put the shackles on their mom, their dad, their teachers, a bad experience, a culture, the media, whatever the reason was. And when all of a sudden I realized that my goal is to help them actualize and liberate themselves, rather than me being the hero and doing it, that tension flowed out of me, and that spirit enabled people so that then they could help teach me.
So on that, we are at the end of our session. I wanted to thank David Tulin, Executive Director of Fellowship Farm, Richard Washington, leader of educational facilitation for Fellowship Farm. If we could give them a round of applause. I want to thank our live audience and our virtual audience from Comcast and as well as NBC Universal. Thank you for joining us today for Fellowship Farm to honor Dr. Martin Luther King. I want to thank the Comcast production team for running the show, which they do all the time with great quality. And thank you all for being here and participating. And please join us on February 26th for the next Employee Enrichment Series honoring Black History Month. And this concludes our program. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.